The bar was almost empty that night. A few regulars lingered at the counter, nursing lukewarm drinks and murmuring about the week ahead. The neon sign buzzed faintly above the door, casting a red glow across the cracked tile floor. Outside, the city hummed with life, but inside, the atmosphere was quiet, almost stagnant. That is, until Ozzy Osbourne walked in. No fanfare, no security entourage. Just Ozzy wearing his signature round sunglasses and leather jacket, looking like he had wandered in from another world entirely. Some of the patrons didn't recognize him at first. To them, he was just another guy who looked a little eccentric, waiting for a drink. Others leaned closer, eyes widening, whispering, "Wait, is that really him?" The bartender, unaware of the full scope of the moment, was wiping glasses behind the counter. He glanced at Ozzy, shrugged, and said casually, almost dismissively, "Next singer, please." He was used to performers in this little bar, some great, some mediocre, and he thought nothing of it. But this wasn't any ordinary performer. For a brief second, the room froze. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The regulars exchanged glances, a mix of skepticism and curiosity written across their faces. Nobody could quite believe what was about to happen, or even if it was happening at all. Some phones appeared from pockets and purses, capturing shaky footage, while others just stared, mouths slightly open. The tension was palpable, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for an illusion to vanish. Then, a soft chuckle escaped from Ozzy. He didn't argue. He didn't correct the bartender. He just walked slowly toward the small stage tucked into the corner, the dim spotlight above flickering to life as if on cue. And in that moment, something changed in the room. The air felt heavier, denser, charged with anticipation. A legend wasn't supposed to be standing here in this tiny, nondescript bar. Yet there he was, right here, among them. Ordinary people in an ordinary place, suddenly witnessing something extraordinary. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Just the faint hum of the neon sign and the quiet shuffle of someone adjusting in their seat. And then it began. The bar itself was nothing special, at least at first glance. Its exterior was faded from years of sun and rain, with a crooked wooden sign that read, "The Rusty Tap." Inside, the walls were lined with worn photographs of past performers, local bands, and a few blurry snapshots of tourists holding beers and awkward smiles. The scent of old wood mingled with spilled drinks, and the faint tang of cigarette smoke, a combination that somehow felt comforting rather than off-putting. The floorboards creaked under every step, and the bar counter, polished in some areas, scratched in others, had seen decades of hands gripping glasses and tapping on its surface in rhythm with music long forgotten. A few neon beer signs buzzed faintly from the walls, their glow reflecting off the low-hanging ceiling fans. The jukebox in the corner stood silent, waiting to be awakened, its plastic buttons worn from years of choices made in seconds, love songs, rock anthems, forgotten hits. The patrons that night were a mix of locals and travelers, each bringing their own stories, worries, and distractions. There was an older man hunched over a half-empty pint, staring into the amber liquid, as though it held the answers to life's biggest questions. A group of college students laughed too loudly, phones out, filming each other's antics. A woman in a leather jacket sat alone near the window, her notebook open but untouched, tapping a pen impatiently. The bartender, a man in his 40s with a kind but tired expression, wiped down glasses with a rag that had seen better days. This was a bar of routine, of predictability, where nothing ever truly surprised anyone. And then Ozzy appeared. He moved with a strange kind of ease, like he belonged there even though he didn't. There was no entourage, no flashing cameras, just the unmistakable aura of someone who had lived a life far larger than these four walls. His leather jacket creaked slightly as he shifted his weight, sunglasses reflecting the dim neon lights, and his boots made soft thuds against the worn floorboards. Some people leaned closer, whispering, "Is that?" Others shook their heads, unsure if their eyes were playing tricks on them. The bartender watched him with a mixture of amusement and mild irritation, still unaware of exactly who this man was. "Next singer, please," he muttered, more to keep the air moving than anything else. He didn't know that he had just issued a challenge to a legend who could turn an ordinary night into a story that would be retold for years. The air in the bar shifted almost imperceptibly. Conversation stopped mid-laugh. The jukebox seemed to hum silently, as if aware of the impending performance. Glasses and bottles reflected the soft glow of neon in patterns that looked almost like stage lights. Even the ceiling fans slowed in their rhythm, as if leaning in to watch. Everyone, knowingly or not, felt it the moment was coming. Something extraordinary was about to happen in a place where extraordinary never occurred. And yet, despite the charged atmosphere, there was still a sense of calm. Ozzy didn't rush. He didn't demand attention. He simply stood there waiting, letting the room recognize the impossibility of the moment before it became reality. Ordinary faces stared, ordinary lives paused, and the bar, a tiny, unassuming corner of the world, was about to be transformed into a stage worthy of a rock god. This wasn't just a bar anymore. This was the threshold of something unforgettable. Next singer, please. The words hung in the air, simple and casual, but in that tiny bar, they felt heavier than anyone expected. The bartender didn't even look up from the glass he was polishing. He had said it countless times before, never imagining that this time, the next singer would be Ozzy Osbourne. To him, it was just routine, a prompt to keep the night moving, to keep the small crowd entertained. But the moment the words left his mouth, a subtle shift passed through the room. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The clink of glass against wood paused. Even the jukebox, silent and waiting, seemed to hum softly as though anticipating the impossible. Patrons who had been chatting or laughing suddenly became statues, eyes widening, hearts beating a little faster. Something unusual was brewing, something that none of them had planned for. Some of the regulars whispered to each other. "Who is that guy, really?" asked one, a young man perched on a bar stool, tilting his head as if studying a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Is he part of the entertainment tonight?" Another scoffed quietly. "Nah, just some drunk fool thinking he can sing." Phones peeked from pockets, ready to capture the moment, but more out of disbelief than expectation. The tension was thick. It wasn't just curiosity, it was doubt, skepticism, and disbelief swirling together. How could someone like Ozzy Osbourne, a rock legend whose name belonged on massive stages with roaring crowds, possibly step into a bar this small and make it work? It seemed absurd. And yet the presence of the man in sunglasses, calm and unassuming, demanded attention, even from those who refused to acknowledge it. Ozzy didn't speak. He didn't argue. He didn't even flinch. He simply moved with slow, deliberate steps toward the tiny stage in the corner of the room. Each step echoed slightly against the creaking floorboards. Patrons shifted in their seats. The older man hunched over his pent, straightened slightly. The woman with the notebook closed it, pensively watching, as if sensing that what was about to happen could not be ignored. The bar's usual sense of normalcy was gone, suspended in the air. It was replaced with anticipation, raw and electric. Some patrons tried to mask their skepticism with laughter, nervously whispering, "This is ridiculous. He's not going to." But even as they spoke, their voices faltered. They couldn't look away. There was an unspoken understanding this moment might be extraordinary, or it might be a disaster, but either way, it would be unforgettable. The bartender, still unaware of the man's true identity, leaned back slightly. "All right, let's see what you've got," he muttered under his breath, part challenge, part casual indifference. He wiped a spot on the counter, the gesture trying to mask the fact that he was just as nervous as everyone else. After all, the bar had seen its fair share of performers, but none like this. And then came the quietest sound, a soft hum almost imperceptible. Ozzy was testing the space, letting the bar feel him before he let everyone in. Patrons leaned in, instinctively, drawn closer by something they didn't yet understand. The air seemed to thicken. You could almost hear the tension vibrating between the worn tables, bouncing off the walls lined with decades of forgotten memories. No one knew when the first note would come. Some held their breath, some gripped their drinks, some even placed their hands over their mouths in anticipation. It was a mixture of fear, wonder, and excitement, all rolled into one suspended moment. Every eye was on him, every heartbeat synchronized in the same slow, deliberate countdown toward the unknown. And then, in that perfect silence, Ozzy opened his mouth. Not yet singing, but letting a single, controlled note escape, just enough to command attention, to claim the space without speaking a word. The room leaned in. The challenge had been set, and the tension was now unbearable. The impossible had arrived, and no one could look away. In that tiny bar, under the dim neon lights and the buzzing of the ceiling fans, the ordinary world had paused. Everything that had been mundane, the hum of conversation, the scraping of chairs, the casual laughter, was gone. There was only Ozzy, standing calmly, waiting to turn doubt into awe, skepticism into reverence. And in that moment, everyone realized the night was about to change forever. Then it happened. Ozzy took a breath, just one, steady and calm, and let the first note escape. It was soft at first, a whisper that seemed too delicate for the room. But even that single note was enough to make everyone stop in their tracks. Conversations froze mid-word. Phones hovered in midair. The bartender, who had been wiping glasses, froze, rag in hand, as if the air itself had changed. And then came the second note. Louder, richer, resonating through the walls, bouncing off the ceiling, seeping into every corner of the tiny bar. It wasn't just a note, it was a presence. Every patron felt it deep in their chest, a vibration that refused to be ignored. The skepticism that had filled the room moments ago began to dissolve, replaced with awe. This wasn't a man performing for a tip. This was a legend reminding the world why his name mattered. Ozzy's voice grew, filling the room with power, passion, and precision. Each note carried years of experience, triumphs, struggles, and raw emotion. The older man at the counter gripped his pint, eyes glistening as memories of concerts passed and youth spent chasing music flooded back. The woman with the notebook, who had been waiting for inspiration, sat frozen, pen forgotten, absorbing every word, every tone. The college students leaned closer, forgetting their phones, realizing that they were witnessing something impossible, a living icon, performing not on a stadium stage, but here, in their very midst. Ozzy moved slowly, almost ceremoniously, across the tiny stage. His sunglasses caught the flickering neon lights, glinting like a star in a world that had forgotten how to look up. His hands gestured subtly, commanding attention without demanding it. There was no arrogance in his performance, only mastery. Every note, every inflection, every pause was deliberate, drawing the room deeper into the moment. The bar seemed to disappear. There were no cracked tiles, no scuffed floors, no hum of the neon sign. There was only Ozzy and the music, a force so strong that it transformed the ordinary space into something sacred. Patrons held their breath, leaned forward in their seats, and let the sound wash over them. It was impossible not to feel it, impossible not to be moved. A hush fell as Ozzy hit the chorus, his voice soaring with intensity and clarity. People who had been skeptical, people who had whispered, laughed, or doubted, now they were clapping, nodding, some even singing along under their breath. The energy in the room shifted from anticipation to exhilaration, as if the bar itself had been awakened. Every heart beat in rhythm with the music, every soul caught in the spell of a performance that would be remembered forever. Even the bartender, a man used to small surprises and local talent, couldn't hide his amazement. He leaned against the counter, mouth slightly open, eyes wide, realizing that he had underestimated the quiet figure who had walked into his bar minutes ago. For once, words failed him. There was nothing to say, nothing to do, except witness. And as the final notes reverberated through the bar, fading into silence, an almost religious hush lingered in the air. People blinked, unsure if it had actually happened or if they were dreaming. The energy didn't fade immediately, it lingered, like a perfume, a memory, a proof that they had been part of something extraordinary. When Ozzy finally stepped back from the microphone, the applause erupted, spontaneous, thunderous, and heartfelt. Chairs scraped, hands clapped, voices cheered. Strangers hugged, laughter and tears mixed together, and the bar became something more than a place to drink. It became a memory, a story, a living testament to the power of presence and talent. In that tiny, dimly lit bar, under the flicker of neon lights and the hum of ceiling fans, a legend had performed. Not for fame, not for money, not for recognition. He had performed for the people in that room, and in doing so, he turned a mundane night into a moment that would be retold for years to come. Ozzy Osbourne didn't just sing that night. He transformed the ordinary into the extraordinary, and everyone present knew that they had witnessed history. The last note lingered in the air, vibrating against the walls and ceiling, until even the faint hum of the neon lights seemed to pause in awe. Then came the silence, a silence so profound that it made everyone realize what had just happened. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the bartender, who had seen countless performances in his life, stood frozen, rag in hand, blinking as though he had just woken from a dream. And then the reactions began, small at first, tentative, almost as if everyone needed permission to process the impossible. Then another. A cheer erupted from a corner of the bar. The applause built like a wave, swelling with excitement, disbelief, and joy. Some patrons stood. Some leaned on tables, some cheered with wild abandon, and others just smiled quietly, letting the warmth of the moment sink into them. The older man at the counter, who had been staring into his pint just minutes before, laughed with tears in his eyes. "I'll never forget this," he said, voice cracking, almost to himself. The words weren't meant for anyone in particular. They were meant to release the awe he had been holding in his chest. He raised his glass in an instinctive toast, and a few nearby patrons followed suit. The woman in the leather jacket, whose pen had been frozen over her notebook, finally exhaled and scribbled furiously, capturing fragments of the experience. "It's unreal," she whispered, almost breathless, her handwriting messy but urgent, as if trying to capture the intangible power of a legend who had just walked into her life. Even the college students, who had been filming initially for laughs, they lowered their phones. Their wide eyes and slack jaws betrayed disbelief. "Did that really just happen?" One whispered. Another shook his head slowly, muttering, "No way, no way." But as the applause and cheers continued, their doubts melted. They smiled, realizing they were part of a memory that would last far longer than any viral clip on their phones. The bartender finally recovered, setting down the rag and letting out a long, incredulous laugh. "I've been running this place for 20 years, he said, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've seen plenty of performers, but that was something else." He shook his head, smiling, the kind of smile that can only come from witnessing pure magic. "Ozzy Osbourne," he muttered, almost reverently, "just sang in my bar." It wasn't just applause or cheers that filled the room. There was laughter, tears, embraces. Patrons who didn't know each other found themselves shoulder to shoulder, connected by the shared shock and wonder of the moment. Strangers whispered to one another, recounting their favorite part, pointing out nuances in his voice or the way he moved. The energy in the bar was almost tangible, an electric current running through everyone, binding them together. Some patrons left, but many stayed, lingering in the afterglow. They replayed the performance in their heads, wordlessly comparing memory to memory, trying to convince themselves it had truly happened. Phones came back out, not to capture but to preserve proof. Pictures of Ozzy, blurry yet priceless, were taken, but no image could capture what the ears and hearts of the witnesses had felt. And as the room slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, everyone knew one thing: the night had changed them. A small bar had become a landmark in their personal histories. It wasn't just that Ozzy had sung, it was the way he did it, the quiet confidence, the mastery, the way he transformed an ordinary space into something extraordinary. Every eye turned toward the small stage one last time, almost instinctively, as if to remember the spot where magic had touched them. And somewhere in that quiet glance, the patrons understood something profound. They had been part of a story that would be retold endlessly. Not in a stadium, not on TV, not in headlines, but here in this tiny, dimly lit bar, where a legend had made them all believe in the impossible. The room buzzed softly with energy, a lingering warmth that refused to fade. Smiles stayed longer than usual. Hands found other hands, strangers connected over shared awe. And in the middle of it all, Ozzy's presence, though no longer performing, still dominated the space, a reminder that the extraordinary can appear anywhere, at any time, if you're lucky enough to witness it. That night, the audience didn't just react to music, they reacted to history. And history in that moment was alive in every laugh, every tear, and every quiet, stunned breath. The morning after, the bar looked the same, but nothing inside it felt ordinary anymore. The faded walls, the scuffed floors, and the hum of the neon signs carried a new weight, a story embedded into every corner. The rusty tap was no longer just a local watering hole. It had become a landmark, a place where the impossible had touched the everyday. The bartender, still blinking in disbelief, replayed the night in his mind as he arranged glasses behind the counter. Patrons trickled in slowly, and some of them whispered to each other, still processing what they had witnessed. A few regulars, who had initially shrugged off the event, returned with wide eyes, recounting every detail of Ozzy's performance with exaggerated gestures and passionate enthusiasm. "You had to be there," they insisted, but deep down, they all knew it. No words could fully capture the electricity that had filled the room. It didn't take long for the story to spread. Tourists passing by noticed the bar's humble exterior, curious about the buzz. They asked the bartender if it was true, if Ozzy Osbourne had really sung there. He smiled, a quiet pride in his chest, and said yes, and it was even better than you'd imagine. Some snapped pictures of the stage, some scribbled notes in their journals, but all left with the same eye. They had glimpsed history through someone else's memory. The bar owners decided to commemorate the night. A small plaque was mounted above the stage, gleaming under the dim lighting. "Ozzy Sang Here." It wasn't a boast, it was a testament. A reminder that legends don't always perform in arenas filled with thousands. Sometimes they show up where no one expects them, turning an ordinary night into an extraordinary memory. The plaque drew attention immediately. Locals stopped to take photos, friends tagged friends on social media, and strangers who had never visited before made the trip, just to see the place where a rock god had walked, breathed, and sung. Months later, the bar had changed. The patrons weren't any different, but the air felt different, heavier with history and reverence. New visitors came carrying cameras, backpacks, and hope. They didn't just come for drinks, they came for the story. Some came quietly, observing the spot where Ozzy had stood. Others sat in the audience's exact positions from that night, pretending to relive the magic. Conversations buzzed with excitement, each recounting of the performance more detailed than the last. Even the regulars, the ones who had seen Ozzy's magic firsthand, felt a quiet pride. They had been witnesses. They had been part of a moment that seemed too big for a bar, but somehow fit perfectly within it. And as time passed, the story became a legend of its own, passed down to newcomers, friends, and strangers who would marvel at the memory, even if they had missed the original night. The plaque glimmered softly in the neon light, a permanent mark of what had happened. Ozzy Sang Here. It read, simple and unassuming, but powerful enough to transform an ordinary bar into a place of pilgrimage. It was proof that magic could exist anywhere, that a single night, a single performer, could change the way a room, a city, even a small corner of the world was remembered forever. And every so often, when the bar was quiet and the hum of neon buzzed faintly, the memory of that night lingered. Patrons would pause, glance at the plaque and smile. They didn't need to hear Ozzy sing again. They had already felt it, etched into the walls, the floors. Sometimes, magic doesn't happen on the grandest stages or in front of the largest crowds. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in unexpected places, and catches us completely off guard. The Rusty Tap, a small, dimly lit bar tucked away from the city's bustle, had been ordinary for decades, until Ozzy Osbourne walked in, turning an ordinary night into something extraordinary. That night the world, or at least that small corner of it, paused to witness what happens when talent, presence, and humanity collide. It's easy to think that legends belong only on stadium stages, under bright lights, with thousands cheering. But the truth is that the impact of greatness isn't measured by numbers, it's measured by moments. Moments that leave people breathless. Moments that make the ordinary unforgettable. Moments that remind us all that something extraordinary can appear when we least expect it. In that tiny bar, every eye saw it, every ear heard it, and every heart felt it. A legend had performed, yes, but more importantly, he had transformed the space with his presence, proving that greatness can touch even the most humble corners of the world. There's a lesson in that for everyone. Life often feels mundane, repetitive, predictable. We move through our routines, unaware of the possibility for magic in the smallest places. But the night Ozzy sang in the Rusty Tap reminds us that extraordinary experiences aren't reserved for the famous or the privileged. They are available to anyone who is present, attentive, and open to wonder. That night was proof that greatness can appear anywhere, at any time, and in the most ordinary settings. You just have to notice it. The plaque above the stage, Ozzy Sang Here, is more than a commemoration. It's a symbol, a reminder, a call to pay attention to the small miracles around us. It doesn't matter if you're sitting in a bar, walking down the street, or simply watching life pass you by. Every ordinary place holds the potential for extraordinary stories. Every ordinary person holds the potential to witness them. And sometimes, just sometimes, the world gives you a moment so rare, so astonishing, that it will stay with you forever. For the patrons who night, that moment became a memory they would carry for the rest of their lives. For the Rusty Tap, it became a landmark, a story etched into its walls, turning it into a place of pilgrimage for fans, dreamers, and believers. And for anyone who hears the story now, it serves as a reminder the next time you're in an ordinary setting. Don't dismiss it. The extraordinary could be closer than you think. So here's the takeaway: pay attention, stay open, and believe in the unexpected. Magic isn't just something in stories, it exists in the real world, waiting for the perfect moment to arrive. And sometimes, it's as simple as a man stepping onto a small stage in a quiet bar, singing a note that changes everything. Because legends aren't defined by their stages, their crowds, or their fame. Legends are defined by the moments they create, the lives they touch, and the stories they leave behind. And that night, Ozzy Osbourne did exactly that. Next time you think an ordinary night is just that, ordinary, remember the rusty tap. Remember the neon lights, the creaking floorboards, the hush of the audience, and the voice that transformed it all. Ordinary doesn't mean meaningless. Extraordinary can happen anywhere at any time, and sometimes all it takes is one note, one presence, one moment to change everything. Tag someone you'd love to share a moment like this with, because the next extraordinary memory might be closer than you think.